On Monday, we brought you the story of the aggressively pro-fracking CEO of ExxonMobil, who's now suing to keep potential fracking paraphernalia away from his mansion. The lawsuit argues the tower, which would be used for fracking, would create a noise nuisance and traffic hazards. You may recognize the suit's lead plaintiff, former House Majority Leader and noted environmentalist Dick Armey. You see, Armey and Tillerson are just concerned about the value of their luxury properties worth multiple millions of dollars. It's a story whose hypocrisy is so acute it is taken off online. It was the top of Reddit politics for 2 days. There's a petition pledging to support Tillerson in his effort if he would return the favor. But we need your help to protect people everywhere from fracking, not just your backyard. There's also been some backtracking. This is not an anti-fracking lawsuit. Michael Whitten, the lawyer representing the plaintiff, said nothing could be further from the truth. Lloyd Hansen, the controller of Cross Timbers Water Supply Corporation, says the new water tower is needed to meet growing residential and commercial demand in the area, as opposed to increased water needs of all the nearby fracking wells. But Rex Tillerson shouldn't feel so lonely, because there's another member of the ExxonMobil family who's also fighting fracking. Lou Allstadt, our next guest, the former executive vice president and operating officer for exploration and production in the U.S., Canada, and Latin America for the Mobil Oil Corporation, a man who worked for ExxonMobil 6 months after that merger. He has written an open letter to Rex Tillerson saying, in effect, you go, girl. Allstadt now lives in upstate New York. He writes, for the past 5 years, I have been actively trying to keep your company and the rest of the industry from fracking here. You and I love the places where we live, but in the end, if they are ruined by fracking or frack water tanks, we can afford to pack up and go someplace else. However, many people can't afford to move away when they can no longer drink the water or breathe the air because they are too close to one of your well pads or compressor stations. We asked Rex Tillerson to be our guest or provide a comment. Mr. Tillerson's lawyer has declined to provide a comment or offer Mr. Tillerson as a guest, and nothing further was forthcoming after another request today. But an ExxonMobil spokesman told Reuters Mr. Tillerson does not object to the tower for its potential use for water and gas operations for fracking. Lou Allstadt, former executive vice president of Mobil Oil Company, joins me now from Utica, New York. So, Lou, I think the thing that we all get about this Tillerson case, it's a classic NIMBYism, not in my backyard. But I want to turn that around on you and say, well, we generally look askew at NIMBY activism, right? There are certain things that have to be built, and property owners don't want them built around them. Isn't all fracking, anti-fracking protesting, including yours, just NIMBYism run amok?
I think some people could look at it and say that. I think other people take a broader view of it and say that continued reliance on fossil fuels is a serious problem and that it's having major climate effects and that we really need to start switching to alternatives.
You worked for this industry for 30 years. At what point did you come to see this?
Well, I had actually retired. I was retired, wasn't going to do anything more in oil and gas, and about 5 years ago, people who knew that I had worked in the industry asked me what I thought about drilling wells close to the lake that draws drinking water for Cooperstown, where I live. And I said, well, that's silly, that no one would put a well that close. And when I started looking into it, I realized that the New York State regulations, even if you thought it was worth getting the gas out, those regulations were just woefully inadequate, allowing wells very close to people's homes, allowing disposal of cuttings, all sorts of things.
You also say in your letter, in your opening letter, say these issues are legitimate. You're talking about some of the concerns about water and noise. You say these issues are legitimate, but they are localized. I am now much more concerned with the greenhouse gas impacts of fossil fuels in generally, particularly the huge impact of methane emissions from natural gas production and transportation. These are global problems that local zoning cannot protect against. Only a major shift towards renewable energy sources can begin to mitigate their catastrophic climate impacts. Do you think folks like Tillerson and folks inside the oil industry that you spent your entire adult career in, do they recognize what they are doing to the climate?
I think they have started to since the early 2000s. I think that's when people started seriously worrying about it. It was just barely coming to the surface when I was still working before 2000, but it's clearly become more and more obvious. More and more scientists, 97% of climate scientists, say that global warming is a real issue and that we've got to do something about it. And one piece of evidence that the companies do know that it's a problem is that many large energy companies and large energy consumers have started building an assumed carbon tax into their economic projections. So they're actually recognizing it internally and at the same time denying it externally.
What do you want to see Rex Tillerson in this tremendously powerful position do, and not just the lawsuit about the water tower, but as the head of Exxon?
Well, one thing he could do, and I think the water tower is something that just precipitated this conversation, but one thing that he could do is actually openly acknowledge the fact that that something has to be done to change and shift away from fossil fuels, and to actually support some kind of a carbon fee, carbon tax that would help push us in that direction.
Lou Allstadt, former executive vice president of Mobil Oil Company. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Up next, what government spies managed to pick up by spying on webcams. Here's a hint. Just what do you think people use webcams for? That's ahead.